Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
Kind of, because there's no way to transition. We've got, some of my preset questions.
No. Let's just go down this question. I'll try to give you shorter answers.
No, you're good. No, this is great. This is so much more than I anticipated what this would do. But there's an element. I got a really good sense of some of your childhood, your the way you approach writing and all this other things. The one thing that we haven't touched on so much that I'm really curious about. I'll tell you how this happened. Be patient with me just a little bit here. I was looking into your titles, looking a little bit deeper, and there was one I was not familiar with that intrigued me called Star Wars Saved My Life. But my question is, growing up in the time you did, which you're a bit older than John and I, but John and I experienced science fiction and fantasy were a subculture of the main culture, and it was really hard to be a nerd. People didn't get it, and that's something that, like, my kids my oldest is 21, and they don't get that because, in a way, Lord of the Rings came out in 1999. Spider-Man was a big movie hit. We're living in this entirely different world now.
Right.
But what was it like growing up for you in your situation, absorbing all that, being a science fiction fan and everything at a time when that wasn't so cool? And I forgot to add one thing. My parents, because this will give you some perspective, my father was a writer. He was in the U.S. Navy and he taught journalism. He 100% supported my writing. He thought it was great.
Beautiful.
Writing. And I was compulsively writing all the time when I was a teenager and a 20-something. And yet I was also into Spider-Man, and I was this geek, and I loved the old Star Trek was running. And Star Wars came out when I was 9. And John can tell you at that age, it pretty much reprogrammed the DNA of a certain people at a certain time. They didn't get it. They tried to be, and I'm not saying that they denigrated it in any way, but they just didn't know what it was about or how to support it or anything like that, which made it kind of awkward, kind of getting through even to this point. But I was curious what your experience was.
Well, I can't tell you why I was initially interested in science fiction, fantasy, horror, so forth. It just seemed to appeal to the way my brain worked. But there's a part of me that suggests that it was because I wasn't happy with the world as it was. And so I began to think about what might the world be in some different ways. And unfortunately, one of the reasons I was not happy had to do with social institutions, had to do with racism. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, science fiction was not a refuge from this. The way I was very much into heroic fantasy, whether it was Conan the Barbarian or James Bond or The Saint or Doc Savage or whatnot. And very clearly, black people were not welcome in that world. And when they did exist in that world, they were subhuman. Tarzan made it extremely explicit in the Jungle Tales of Tarzan. One of the stories, he basically Burroughs makes his position explicit. Says white men have imagination, black men will have little, animals have none. The same thing is going to be true in Bond or Conan or whatever. So the way I put it to one audience was that I sacrificed my melanin on the altar of my testosterone. I needed to know what it was to be a man because I wanted to get certain reactions from men and certain reactions from women. So it was like, well, what is it that I have to do to be this? So I was caught. The real world wasn't pleasant to me. The fantasy world, I had to actually shut down part of my of what I would notice. My son, picked up on it even earlier than I did. It's like, Dad, why do the black men die in movies so often? I would see that. And when I would go see one of these movies, my friends would ask me, how did they kill the brother this time? So I knew I was dealing in a world that was hostile to me.
I don't mean to laugh, but I absolutely know what you're talking about. Every action movie in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one movie, the first movie where I spoke about this to somebody was Damnation Alley, where, Jan Michael Vincent and George Papard and Paul Winfield are in an atomic Winnebago traveling across a nuclear devastated landscape. And they come to, I think it's Las Vegas. and a woman appears from the wreckage, and she's the last woman in the world, and she's white. And I was seeing this with a buddy of mine named Dan Pinal, and I leaned over to Dan and I said, "They're going to kill Paul Winfield." And he said, "God, you're cynical." And 5 minutes later, he got eaten by giant cockroaches. And after the movie, Dan looked at me and said, "How did you know?" I said, "She was the last woman in the world. They weren't going to pretend that he wasn't interested, and they weren't going to let him compete for her. So the only thing they had left to do was kill him." And that's what they did. And to recognize that meant that I would watch Star Wars, which had no black people in it. You know, the sequel did. You know, they responded and brought in Billy D. Williams. You know, and he and Samuel Jackson are the only black people of any consequence, and across all 9 movies. Well, I guess Finn finally a little bit, but I can live with that. I can deal with that. It's difficult to love something and know that you're not loved in return. That's what I knew. I was not loved. These people did not consider me to be of their tribe in that way. And if I brought it up, it was going to hurt me. And there was actually a point in my career where I was not dealing with those issues, and another point where I realized I had to deal with them in my writing, or else I was betraying myself, and that I had stood a very good chance of harming my career. Very good chance of harming my career. I had people say, if you talk about this, I'm going to stop reading your stuff. I'm not interested in the politics. I'm not interested in this race meeting bullshit. And so I had to make a decision about who I am and what's important to me and what gifts I have to give the world. And I realized I had to deal with it directly, or I was being a coward. So, it's my mom, she knew I was into science fiction and stuff like this, and she did not want me to be a writer. She wanted me to be something else, doctor, lawyer, whatever. My dad had been an artist. He'd been a backup singer for Nat King Cole. He hadn't been able to stay in hotels or walk through the front door of hotels in Vegas where he could perform. And it had destroyed his career and ultimately had probably damaged their marriage, leading to me growing up without a father. And I think she was just trying to protect me from that. And I could accept that too. This is just the world as it is. I can rail against what that is, or I can have a happy life. I can figure out how to have a happy life despite these problems. And my attitude is very much one of this is the only life I'm going to get. So I'm going to be happy. This writing, fantasy, science fiction is the stuff that I like the most. So I'm going to find some way to make it in this field. So I enjoy it, even as I wince from it. I mean, it's terrible to feel like, for instance, I can't watch an X-Men movie. And you may or may not realize this. Have you seen any X-Men movies? Seen them?
Oh, most of them, yes.
Yeah. You notice not a single black man has ever survived an X-Men movie. Over 15 years or something like that they've been making those things. From the very beginning, including Logan and, not a single black man, that means a character with a line of dialogue, has survived a single X-Men movie. And most people don't even notice.
I would... I take your word at that. I would have to admit I have not noticed that. I can remember, not that you care, but I'm just going to bring this up. Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Watching that one, and the part where the scientist is holding the dead man switch, and he's yeah. And the breath is leaving his body, and I can remember very specifically thinking, are we really still doing this?
But that's true of all of Jim Cameron's work.
Yeah.
You can't name a black character in a black male character in any of Jim Cameron's work who survived. There actually are a couple. There was a garbage man in either Terminator or Terminator 2 who had one line of dialogue. Something like, "What the fuck?"
The first one when he arrived. Yeah.
Yes.
And then there is in Avatar, there is a black sergeant or something who is saying something to the people who are arriving, so that he has like 2 lines of dialogue there. But that's it for James Cameron's entire oeuvre.
Yeah, I think there was a drill sergeant in Aliens, but he was.
Of course, he died.
Kind of there. Well, that.
He,
Oh, I
he
gotcha.
yeah, he and the other blacks were the first ones to die.
Apone.
That's true.
Apone, that's right. That's exactly right. You know, I love the Corps. Every meal a banquet, every paycheck a fortune, every formation a parade. I love the Corps. I love that character.
Yes.
And they killed him rapidly.
Yes, and
So-
the other character, we didn't even really get to know anything. He had a couple of lines of dialogue, and then he was gone.
And if you were to say something, they could easily create black characters and it would just be fun. You know, once that they have to put their attention on it. If they don't put their attention on it, then your unconscious values come out. And it's the question, who's disposable? And I've seen countless times who is disposable. And I consider that linked to Black Lives Matter. It's the same thing, that people of other tribes are not as valuable to you as people of your own tribe. It's as simple as that. And you want to believe that your tribe is the sexiest, smartest, strongest. You know, and those are going to be the images that you enjoy. And it is nothing personal. It's just what I had to deal with. So, you know, what I have to do is ask myself, well, what can I do to make the world a better place so that my children don't have to go through what I went through? And, you know, Marvel, which I dearly love, did some wonderful things with Sam Jackson and then Black Panther. But then as of in Infinity War, they took their eyes off the ball and they started killing black men disproportionately. You know, and you know, Sam Jackson was completely neutered to the point where he goes from being this amazing figure who can command gods and billionaires, you know, and back them down, to this idiot who lets himself lose an eye, you know, because he's playing with a cat instead of staying on point in a mission, and then is too stupid to go see a doctor about it. It's like I couldn't believe what they did. I could not believe that.
That wasn't the only problem with that movie, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, I mean, to understand that, it makes you ask questions about, well, you know, what is my position? What should I do? What can be done? So it's simultaneously loving the field and being aware that, you know, the people in the field are human beings. That this is human stuff we're dealing with. This is tribal stuff that we're dealing with. And, you know, the majority of the people who've been my friends, lovers, mentors over the course of my life have been white. So I have to deal with that, you know, and, you know, how do I make sense of all of that has driven my philosophy, my sense of, well, what is it to be human, such that we get these effects as well.
Do you remember a point in time when you decided that this was something you needed to address in your fiction? Were you already a commercial fiction writer at that point?
Yeah, I was already a commercial fiction writer, and I've been ignoring some of those things. And I can remember this specific conversation. I was talking to a friend of mine named Darnell Gadberry, who's a computer engineer, extremely brilliant man, and black. And we were in his house, and we were talking, and I was being very honest that I felt like I'd been a coward in terms of not addressing these things in my work. But that if I did address them, I was afraid it was going to damage my career. But if I didn't do it, I felt like I'd be betraying the little boy I'd been, who looked out at the world and said, why do people hate me? Why don't they love me? Why don't they see me? And he said something really interesting to me. He said, Steve, eventually someone's going to have to start writing the stories that humanize us. If not you, who? If not now, when? And why would you want to write stories for the pleasure of people you wouldn't want to have in your house? And I said, damn. And I realized he was telling the truth. That whatever it cost me, it was going to cost me less than it had cost my father, and less than it had cost my grandfather. That my ancestors were watching me, and I was standing on their shoulders, and I have an obligation. I figured, I'm a very clever boy. I'm very, very, very smart, and I know it. And intelligence is problem solving. I believe that no matter what happens here, I'll find a way to survive. I'll find a way to be happy. I will write the stories that flow from my heart, from my perspective. It's all I really have to give to the world. It's all I've got is who I am. If I don't do that, I have nothing. And I've allowed the bigots and unconscious bigotry, because I think most bigotry is unconscious, to determine who I am. And I will not do that. And if the martial arts allowed me to be calm when a 6'4" mugger is challenging me on the street, it can help me to be calm when I'm writing a story in the privacy of my house and I'm asking myself, do I speak my truth? And the question, why not speak my truth? What is it that anybody can offer me that's more important than being true to myself? No matter what I do, I'm going to die. I'm going in the box. I'm going in the ground, no matter what I do. So armed with that, then I must ask myself, what can I do every day that acknowledges the gift of another day of life? I need to be courageous. I need to be loving. I need to be compassionate. I need to have the greatest amount of clarity I have. There are going to be people who are much better writers than I am. And in almost every case, they've also put more of themselves into their work. They deserve to. Octavia Butler put more of herself in her work than I put into my work. She was as committed to her art as anyone I've seen who was not insane. Okay? I don't deserve to be as good a writer as Octavia was, and certainly not at that point in my life, because I didn't put as much myself into it. But I have to put everything that I can. I have to be true to my spirit. And that means I have to address these things. So Darnell, that conversation was one of the, I can point to, a dozen different real turning points in my life. And that was one of them.
Wow. John, I have a really good follow-up to that. With your permission, I'd like to go ahead and keep the baton a little bit longer.
Go for it.
Because I have a question here. A couple years ago,
yes.
And all of a sudden there was this mainstreaming of the Black experience, and
that's right.
Afro.
That's right. There's never been anything like Black Panther.
Yeah. But there was also this really, I thought, kind of a cynical perspective that, wow, Black people are here and they have a viewpoint and a perspective like people didn't know that before. So I was curious with one, you do have, 1 foot in Hollywood and 1 foot as a mainstream writer. What are you seeing? Is this providing genuine opportunities for you to do more? Or
yes. That and Jordan Peele would Get Out. Those, it proved no single action or project changes everything, but every point changes the conversation just a little bit. Okay, mm-hmm. So we're not going back. In other words, it will not be as big as it is right now because we're pushing against the dominant cultural mythology about Black people is that we're inferior. I mean, the most popular film in American history was Gone with the Wind. And if you take a look at the opening crawl in Gone with the Wind, in adjusted dollars, nothing has come close to making as much money as Gone with the Wind. If you look at the opening crawl, it's a celebration of slavery. Once there was a glorious land, land of cavaliers and their ladies, of masters and slaves, so forth, genteel land that is gone with the wind. That's what the title means. And it was not until Gone with the Wind came out in 1930-something? 39. It wasn't until, arguably, Django Unchained, when Quentin Tarantino did Django Unchained, I will take the position that was the first mainstream studio movie that ever depicted slavery from the possession of the slaves. That every other movie had dealt with former slaves, people on their, in other words, like Beloved, or Glory, free Africans on their way to being slaves, like Amistad. But most of them, although there were countless movies about the Civil War, not a single movie about the institution that made it inevitable from the position of those people. The mythology was that slavery was appropriate.
Yeah.
that slavery was good for the slaves. You talk to anybody whose family owned slaves, and their family mythology is, well, we treated our slaves like family. They were, you know, we loved them and they loved us, and they stayed on after the Civil War, and, you know, slaves were protected because they were valuable property. That's the dominant mythology. You have to break that down. The only way slavery could be good for slaves is if they were not fully human. They were not as smart, not as capable.
And
So,
another element to that was Hollywood's fixation on slavery as a subject itself. I mean,
well, Hollywood has never been fixated on it. You know, my position is it was avoided. Like I said, it was the first. If Django Unchained, if you can name another major studio film,
yeah,
dealt with slavery as the thing itself, from the inwardness of the slaves, I'd like to know what it was. I mean, a theatrical motion picture, not television, theatrical motion picture. So if that's true, then what has happened there is that we're finally, you know, with 12 Years a Slave and Django Unchained and a couple other movies, we're finally dealing with what might be the greatest unhealed wound in the American character. I mean, we've dealt with movies specifically dealing with Native Americans and the horror there. I mean, even though it hasn't been represented sufficiently, it's been represented because, you know, we don't have to worry about Native Americans. They're gone for all practical purposes. You know, they got some casinos, but they're not a force in American life in the same way. Whereas black people, you know, we're 12% of the population. There's enough of us, you know, to actually disrupt the culture. And it's what our concerns that our full humanity has been shut away. Now we're starting to deal with it. And you can see how uncomfortable people are with the possibility that maybe the playing field has been uneven. That possibility that the world, that American culture has been tilted against is terrifying, creates massive anger and massive political upheaval from people who do not want to look at that possibility. For various and sundry reasons. So I think that every one of these movies is another thumb on the scale. It's another rebalancing. It's a, you know, and you get people like, you know, Bree Newsom, I guess it was, who the lady who climbed the flagpole to bring down the Confederate flag.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a new generation of young black people. See, my generation had to have this sort of like, you know, wait and see, you know, let's, you know, incremental change, you know, respect people's feelings, you know, let's maintain the system. This generation we have right now is, you know, it's a little bit like if you go riding horseback, the horse will canter or will just kind of, you know, walk slowly. But when you start heading back to the barn, the horse starts running because it can smell the finish line. Okay, so the generation of kids right now, we've closed enough of the gap that they're starting to smell actual equality. They're starting to smell, you know, it's actually achievable now. So the attitude that they have now is sort of like, why don't you tell me exactly why my children should not enjoy the same rights and privileges that your children have? And if you'd like to, we could go outside and discuss this. Mm-hmm. That's what these kids are like now. And my attitude is sort of like,
you go, kid. Yeah.
So movies like Black Panther, you know, have changed the game. But, you know, I noticed, you know, I would have some attitudes about the movement to promote Shuri to the catsuit because of the death of Chadwick Boseman. You know, that's like, oh, okay, well, one of the things that we know that slavery did was disrupt the black family so that black women actually had more power than black men relative to the power between white men and women, thereby throwing that balance off. So you get all of these families without men in them, which then throws the balance of those kids off and leads to generational problems. So they want to do that to Wakanda. Because the actor died, they would like to not recast that actor, throw the balance totally toward the feminine. And we've already got the Dora Milaje. They were already 3 times more, you know, respectable, powerful black women in that movie than there were black men. There really were. So now they would like to remove all of them. And so now it's just this. Well, I don't consider that a compliment. In fact, I consider that to be deliberately or not of a piece with the same social disruption that happened in the community in real life. So I'm not happy about that. If, you know, and hopefully they won't make that mistake, because if they do, I will consider it similar to what they did in Infinity War, and with Fury, and my emotional association with Marvel will be over. Kevin Feige will have blown it.
There are certain topics where, as a white person, I feel like I should not offer a strong opinion. But
no, you can offer opinions. I mean, because dialogue is important. You can't offend me with it. Of course.
Well, what I was saying is I absolutely agree with every word you just said. Another thing I want to say is,
and you notice I have to not give a shit what people think. In other words, that it's not just racists who are going to have a problem with what I'm saying. It's also a certain thread of feminists.
Well, I made the joke about the Black Kal-El Superman announcement that went out a week ago too, where it's like, okay, I see what everyone's saying. I absolutely agree with all of it, but I'm just going to sit here and not say anything because
you can't agree with all of it because some of it is yes and some of it is hell no. So
yeah, I'm seeing a whole lot of hell no actually from the Black community. Yeah. Of which I would agree, and I would agree with what you said as well. But I have to take a step back. Go ahead.
There are problems. Trevor Noah did a great routine on why Black James Bond would be problematic. I just laughed my ass off, and he's right. Mm-hmm. You know, Bond. If you could take a look at most of the Bond movies, and if he had been black, it would have been a hell of a lot easier for his enemies to find him. I mean, seriously, the Bond, will run away and hide in a crowd. And if he's someplace in Slovakia somewhere, I'm sorry, Idris Elba is going to stand out. So it's like it's going to be hard for him to be a spy in that sense. I was just laughing and laughing and laughing.
Excellent point.
It's difficult. Yeah. I don't know whether or not Tarzan is a concept capable of rehabilitation. I don't know. I don't know. I heard that somebody say, well, what if he'd been abandoned in Pellucidar, at the core of the earth? Well, that could actually, it would be much less problematic. Be much less problematic. I think I might be excited to see a movie like that because I loved Tarzan when I was a kid. I'm just aware that the underpinning of it is that a white man raised by apes is still a white man. That was really what they were thinking. It's the ultimate nature versus nurture argument, the ultimate one. There's no way around it. But how do we navigate this stuff? I think it is by having conversations between people who are willing to respect each other. How do we get here? How do we move forward?
Absolutely. Wow. That was incredible. So you're giving me a lot to think about. So ultimately, has this opened up opportunities?
Hell yes.
Yes. Perfect.
Absolutely. But I've noticed
talk about it, or you just want to leave it there?
Well, no. I mean, God, Jordan Peele, that I wasn't supposed to be able to get back into Hollywood. I left Hollywood for 10 years to raise my daughter in the Northwest. And by the time I came back, I'd aged out. Ageism had kicked in, and I was too old to work on staff for television series. I was over 50, and they didn't hire anybody over 40. And so having both age and race working against me was, it was kicking my ass. I was still making all the moves I could, but there are a lot of moves that were not open to me. But my wife, God, that's a different discussion, but the short version of it is that because of Tananarive and because of what's happening in Hollywood with women gaining power and black women in those situations beginning to network with each other, let's just say we've got more work right now than we've ever had. But literally all of that work, there's not a single one of those jobs that came from a room full of white men. None of them. Not one of them. For all practical purposes, all the jobs we've gotten have either come from rooms full of women or rooms full of black women.
Yes.
It's just that simple. That that enough people have worked their way into the system in Hollywood that we can do end runs around around racists and around white men who are not racist necessarily, but are tribalistic. They want to see themselves. They want to see themselves as the sexiest, best, smartest. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants to rule the world, as the song goes. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there are opportunities right now, and I'm very aware that we're I knew early in my career that I used to call it pogo sticking through a minefield. And now it's not quite that bad, but I have to remember that the black women who are now creating these opportunities have paid a real price in terms of their social lives, in terms of feeling isolated. And so I have an obligation to respect them and to serve them. Absolutely. They're making it possible for my family to do very well right now. You know, this is turning into an amazing year in terms of career things. But I'm aware that it's not just because I'm so smart.
Very, very cool. No, you know, for what it's worth, there are a lot of white people who are aware of exactly what you said, and it's
yes, there are, of course. You know, like I said, Larry Niven's my mentor. Larry's as white as you can get.
Right, yeah.
No, I think that there's absolutely nothing special about white people, either positively or negatively. I have no sense that white people are some special evil in the world. They're just people, and these things are problems that we have as a species. It's nothing personal. It just happens to affect me personally. You know, it hurts, but I try not to let it change my view of the basic nature of human beings.
Very good. I know John wants to jump in and
come on, John.
Talk about some other stuff, John. So I will pass it back to him.
So since you were talking about Hollywood,
Hollywood.
You know, I can't help but be inspired and so proud of what you and your wife have accomplished.
Isn't she amazing? She really
awesome.
She blows my mind.
She is awesome, and she's done so much in what she's done that has been uplifting to our community.
Yeah,
gotten.
You should have met her mother. She comes of great stock. Her parents were civil rights icons in Florida.
Okay.
And you know, she's standing on her mother's shoulders. Her mother was a lioness. I mean, just amazing woman. Anyway, go ahead.
So, you both collaborated on the Twilight Zone episode recently, and in the past, you had been working with the Tennyson Hardwick series. Can you tell our audience about your experiences with regards to the Twilight Zone episode and the Tennyson Hardwick series, and how did you come to collaborate with Blair Underwood?
Well, Tanana Reeve had written My Soul to Keep, thinking about Blair Underwood in the lead. She was sort of envisioning him because she thought he was, you know, just incredibly gorgeous, which he is. It's discomforting to walk into a room full of women standing next to Blair Underwood, because if you'd ever wondered if invisibility exists, you found out at that moment, yes, it does. And he had optioned it, and they tried for years to get it going. And you know, it got optioned by 20th Century Fox and some other people, you know, done it. But things did not work out there. However, along the way, Blair had asked her if she'd be interested in working with him on a book that he wanted to do that had to do with something historical. And she talked to me about it. I said, well, listen, if you're going to work with him, I think it would be probably best to work with him in something that could conceivably, just in case it takes off, it could be, you know, long lasting, that it could actually have, you know, a real impact on us, that you can keep doing. How about mystery novels? You know, you can do a great series for that. So he liked that idea. We created a character based on people that he knew in Hollywood and some of his own early experiences. And Tennyson Hardwick came out of that. So that's what Tennyson did. The question of collaboration, which is the implicit in what you said, when we first got married, we knew that it was possible for us to collaborate together. So we came up with some rules. You know, how are we going to do this? And one of them is that the first and most important rule is that we have to be able to fight. in order to collaborate together. So we have to not be afraid that fighting will damage the relationship, because if we do, then one or the other of us can kind of imply, well, you know, if you don't do it my way, then I might withdraw from you. So we have to do is make sure that never happens. So that we have to have, the rule is that the relationship itself is never on the line, ever, ever. And that's proven to be the most essential thing, because if our conversations get heated, it can get pretty bad at times. So we have to be willing, you know, every night we kiss goodnight, you know, every morning we hug. And that we can put that stuff away. It's not important. It's just two artists trying to work things out. Another rule is that on every project, somebody has to be the leader. The other person is the follower. So on any book that we do, any script that we write, look and see whose name comes first on the title. Whoever name comes first in the title, that's the person who took the lead. And it varies. You know, I took the lead with, she took the lead with Tennyson Hardwick. That was very deliberate, because I wanted Tennyson Hardwick to be tough on the outside, but kind of a chewy sinner on the inside. So by having her do the first drafts, there was a feminine thread to Tennyson that, you know, I would have to pull her back from how rapidly he might cry or beg for his life, you know, because she's not a confrontation person. I had to say, well, no, a martial artist is going to do things this way, and a man is going to do things this way. But I was able to get that sensitivity just by her doing the first draft. On the Devil's Wake young adult zombie novels, I took the lead on those for various reasons. On the Twilight Zone script, my name comes first. On a script that we just did for AMC, her name comes first. On a movie script that we did, her name comes first. So, you know, it varies. But that thing that of somebody having to take lead, I learned that from working with Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Somebody has to take the lead, because otherwise you can get stuck. In terms of the Twilight Zone, that came out of her connection with Jordan Peele, which came out of the class that she teaches at UCLA, and the fact that she's a social media person. She was just tweeting about the fact that she was teaching Get Out in her class at UCLA, and somebody at Monkey Paw Productions forwarded her tweet to Jordan Peele. And he sent her a tweet saying, "Ha ha, wouldn't it be funny if I, you know, snuck into your class?" So we actually did it. We actually set it up to sneak him into her class. So she's showing, nobody knows that he's there. And she's showing a clip. And then after the clip is over, she says, "Well, what do you think the filmmaker was trying to tell us about the commoditization of black bodies in America?" And a couple people raised their hands, and he's sitting with sunglasses and a hoodie on in the back, and he raises his hand like this, and she says, "The gentleman in the back." And he stood up. The class went berserk. I mean, people running out of the class crying. I mean, it was great, and he was wonderful, and he was brilliant, and he was so kind to those students. And it turned into a thing that we did every semester. But in the process, of course, we developed a relationship with Jordan. And so when he did Twilight Zone, we got to pitch. And we didn't get through on the first season. We got through on the second season. And I told her, I said, if this works, it's going to change everything. Because suddenly we have current credits again. And I have current credits again, which I have not had in years. My credits had all aged out. Nobody cared what had happened. I'd done a generation ago. So that's what happened with Twilight Zone, which led to all these other things that are happening. And it's a lot of stuff. So I know that you're saying that we're running out of time. So I want to make sure that the most important questions that you have are being answered. So I want you to take a look at that list and look at what's in your heart and be sure that you start with the app. Don't worry about what's in order. What's the stuff that you really need from me? What do you need to hear from me?
No, absolutely. John will edit this into as many parts as well, we could cut this part out actually if you want, John, but we'll I'm sure John's happy to go as long, but I want to be respectful of your time. I've asked most of my questions, and I know John.
Well, the two things I would ask for is that lifewritingpremium.com, and I'm going to give you another URL. If you're interested in my martial arts philosophy, and I've got another course called The Warrior's Journey, which is the most recent evolution of the life writing system, where I found the world's, as far as I'm concerned, the world's greatest women's self-defense instructor, who in 2 days could give women more of that thing of being connected to their survival drives than most schools can in 2 years. And she was doing something phenomenal. And we actually created a 10-day course to teach people that. So if you put that on your put these things on your website, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. So do we want to like re-queue for the conversation? What do you want to do, John? He's kind of the director here.
Hold on just a second. I'm going to type that in. That I'm typing that website that he shared with us.
Yeah, lifewritingpremium.com and www.realwarriorsjourney.com.
Right. I have this whole like display of another.
Fantastic.
I'm just putting that in there so we can reference it later.
Right. I love teaching. I love talking about these things. I love writing. I love being a family man. My life is blessed. I am so blessed in terms of the friends I've had, the teachers I've had, the experiences that I've had, the fact that I am married to the love of my life, my soulmate, that I'm still an athlete, and I'll be 70 next year. And I'll be going to Manila for a week-long martial arts conference, and I want to be in the best shape of my life when I go, and I know how I'm doing that. And it's like, how did this happen? How did I get so lucky that I was able to spin straw into gold in these ways? And I have to thank my mother. I have to thank the teachers I met along the way, and God has just been really good to me in that sense. And this is why I'm willing to share so much, and I'm willing to be as personal when I'm talking about these things, because
this is fantastic stuff. Don't hear me wrong.
Oh no! I caught no criticism from you. I'm just kind of saying why when I get into it, when I get into my conversations, why I enjoy them, why I'm willing to spend time doing this, because I know that there's somebody out there who's listening to this who needs to hear what I'm saying. And so I'm talking to that young man, that young woman, or that older man or woman who needs to hear from somebody that it's all right for them to be afraid and to feel lost, and that they can still find themselves, that they can still wake up in a minute, in a moment, that it's not too late for them to live lives of integrity and joy and passion and contribution. That, as the Dalai Lama said, that the meaning of life is to seek joy, to be happy. That we actually not only have permission to be happy, but if we're happy, we get to give permission to the people around us to be happy. That being happy in that sense is a divine challenge. It's our task to be happy and to spread joy in a healthy way. So, if you have any questions about any of these things, my history, my process, the martial arts, writing, relationship, all that stuff is all part of who I am.
So you did queue up a question that I was going to ask, and you've kind of talked about a little bit, but I know, you don't just collaborate with your wife, you have to live with your wife. And what is it like to live with my wife? What is it like for two intensely creative, successful people? Because John and I are also both creatives. We get moody, we get cranky, we have to have our alone time. We have a system.
And I have insecurities. I have insecurities, and the world loves Tananarive's work more than it loves mine. And trust me, it gets to me a little bit. And a little kid inside me has that sort of like, why not me? Why not me? How come? God, every time I turn around, somebody's trying to buy another one of her projects. What about me? Am I spit on the sidewalk? That stuff can go on in my mind, and that can damage your marriage if you're not careful. So it's a matter of every day remembering how blessed we were to find each other, that no matter how cranky I can get or how many imperfections I can find, it's not like If I could have done any better, I would have. You know what I'm saying? It's like I better remind myself that this is as good as it gets. You know, in that sense, you know, that I am not perfect. You know, that I cannot be easy to live with, and that if I better be very sure that whatever the problem is not something that is in me. You know, am I expecting her to be something beyond being, you know, beautiful and wonderful and sexy and smart and loving me with all of her heart? Am I expecting her to be perfect? I mean, really? What's going on here? You know, from the time that we wake up in the morning until we go to bed at night, we're the same people. You know, I love her. I tell her every day that I love her. Every day. Every day. You know, we fight over things. The more we care about things, the more we're likely to fight over them. You know, like the welfare of our son. You know, I don't play any games about that. My boy, you know, when he was born, I did the Roots thing. I literally held him up to the sky and went outside, held him to the sky and said, "Behold, the only thing greater than yourself," you know, and promised God that I was going to deliver my son safely to his adulthood. You know, and I will die on that hill. And my son knows that about me. You know, that I can't be his buddy. I wish I could. I hate being a disciplinarian, but that's what he needs. He's a tiger cub, you know, and he needs that. So what it is between the two of us is trying to remember how blessed we were to find each other. That neither of us is looking for a back door. You know, this is it. You know, this is it. We are committed. We are a mated pair. You know, and we're going to ride out life together. And when you deny yourself any room to back out the door, things look different. If this is it, and this is it for me, you know, if she got hit by a bolt of lightning, I have no doubt that I'd find a really nice person to, you know, to take care of my needs and to spend my life with. But if I fuck this relationship up, it's downhill from here. If I blow it, I would never find a woman anything close to her level again. Ever, ever, ever. It would not happen. That is absolutely my belief. There's nothing out there, no matter how good somebody looks, no matter what she whispers in my ear about what she's going to do for me. There is nobody out there who's got anything that, you know, there's no number 2. There's no backup plan. There's no number 3. I don't know who's number 4 on the list. I mean, seriously, it's that bad. Or conversely, she's that good. Tananarive really is that spectacularly wonderful. She really is that cute and sweet and smart and creative and lucky and has skills that I do not have concerning things like social media and timing because of that whole black girl magic thing. Oh no, T is the article. She's the real deal. She really is that, you want to know what we're saying when we get insecure about the opportunities in Hollywood and stuff like this, and can we do this? What we say, we look at each other, we say, we are that bitch. We are that bitch. We are what they're looking for. We really are. That people have no idea. You know, that I've taken a lot of damage in terms of, you know, my ego and what I think I can accomplish and stuff like that. But one thing that I believe is that the two of us together, working together as a super mind, we can handle anything. That we are way more than the minimum level of quality necessary to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing this. You know, we may not be, you know, at the level of the best of the best of the best in the field, but we are definitely in the professional league. That we are producing at a professional level. And when we have a chance to hang out with professional people, top people whose names I will not mention, but whose work you would definitely recognize, their attitude is, you're just like us. You know, of course you can do this. You know, it's not calculus. It's honesty. It's hard work. It's making connections. It's trusting your creative instinct. It's these things. It's these things that you guys are. You know, and it's wonderful to know that that to be able to associate. We play mini golf on Friday nights with one of the biggest executive producers in Hollywood. You know, whose work you would instantly recognize. But he's just our buddy. You know, how did we meet him? We didn't. Tananarive did on the side of a documentary that she was a part of. You know, he recognized her in the hall, and it's like we got together for lunch, and then we became friends, and you know, and we bought him an Oculus 2, and thanks for some introductions that he made, and now we get to, you know, during the pandemic we were getting together every Friday night playing virtual mini golf, you know, and just hanging out, talking about life and the business and the projects that he's working on, and you know, just talking through story. And he's brilliant. He's brilliant. Oh my God, he's smart. And when he talks to us about story and lays out how he thinks about how he creates his images, I just want to take notes, you know. But he gives us his stuff for us to give evaluation to. I realize, oh, that's the level we're playing on. Is that who we are? Okay, then, you know, let me stay humble, but let me also have pride in how far we've come. You know, let me take responsibility for this. You know, the brass ring doesn't come around an infinite number of times. That I don't know how much I've got. I don't know how far I can go. What I do know is I'm not going to leave anything in the locker room. It's all going to be left on the field. I know. It's gonna be blood on the grass, man. I'm gonna give 100% of everything I have every time and give thanks for every opportunity. And I'm taking nothing for granted. Not this go round. This is my last rodeo. You know, if I blow this, I'm not gonna. You know, I don't have another 30 years to come back around. You know, I figure if I could get 10 good years operating at this level, you know, where things are working and my family is healthy and I'm able to create images and books. If I could have that for 10 years, I would accept whatever on the other side of that with joy. I've had a great life. In fact, I've already gotten everything I asked from life when I was a kid, literally, because I wanted martial arts mastery, and you know, I've got 3 black belts, and one of them is a ridiculously high level. I've got the love of my life. I've written over 3 million words of fiction and won awards and walked with princes and kings in that sense, you know. And it's the little kid I was growing up in South Central LA. I asked myself, what would he think about who you are now? And I know the answer to that. I know that the little kid inside me is just, you know, he's very aware of all the scar tissue I've got and all the things I've failed at and all the things I've tried and the times I've let myself down or done things that are not ethical. But he knows I've tried my best, and he knows that I've never quit, and he knows that I never will quit. And that little kid inside me is so happy with me. He just smiles, and it's like, oh, Daddy, you've done your best. You know, he's like a puppy. A puppy doesn't care whether or not you got a raise. The puppy cares. Did you play with him? Did you feed him? Do you love him? You let him sleep next to your feet? That's all your puppy cares about. That's all your kids care about. And that's all the little kid inside you cares about. Do you care about the things that you used to love? You know, are you finding a way to express your childhood dream? Harlan Ellison said that success is in an adult fashion actualize your childhood dreams. If you can do that, you're going to be happy. And if the Dalai Lama, one of the most evolved human beings I know of, says that that's the point of life, I'll settle for that. I'm a happy guy.
Wow. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
John, I have no more questions.
Okay. Do you have no more questions?
If I didn't ask him, you kind of hit him anyway. So
okay.
John has some genre stuff.
How about you, John? I want to make sure you're happy.
Well, I have one. Question, and it kind of goes into your writing.
Yeah.
With Larry Niven and Jerry Perel.
That was interesting.
One of the things about it, even when I was a kid, when I saw the novels, I was like, 3 guys wrote a book together? Because I hadn't really seen, I'd seen some people had collaborated on more like text, but not fiction, you know. And when I saw that, I always wondered, because I never thought I'd ever meet you. It was one of those situations where, as a kid, you know, well, you know,
you engineered that. It wasn't an accident. So you did something very smart. I want you to notice something. You wanted to meet me and found a way to legitimately reach out to me and offer me a chance to promote myself on your podcast, which gives you the opportunity to have the conversation you wanted to have. That's smart. That's smart. That's how you do it.
Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
I can check that off as one of the things off my bucket.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your specific question about working with Larry and Jerry?
How did you guys, you had touched upon briefly about how you and Dananna Reeve do things, but how did you have a collaboration in writing? How did that work?
Okay, so the first thing is that my collaboration with Larry happened because I stalked him. I went looking for a professional writer who could help me to learn the things I needed to learn. So I worked with Larry, for several years. And then one day, Larry and Jerry, who were already collaborating with each other, came to me with an idea for a novelette based on an idea that they'd gotten from a reproductive biologist named Jack Cohen about an ecosystem in Africa. It's just a pond that all that's in it is algae, frogs, and tadpoles. The tadpoles eat the algae, the frogs eat the tadpoles. That's all that's in the entire ecology. So they had this idea about writing a story about an alien world that seems to have a very simple ecology, and the colonists accidentally upset the ecology without understanding that if they kill the frogs, suddenly they're going to be billions of tadpoles. And if those tadpoles are voracious, it's ugly. And they wanted to write it as sort of an EC Comics, ecological warning story, with it just ending with them being swarmed by these things. And so because they realized this was a horror story, and that was not the kind of thing that they did, they know that I have a sick sense of humor, and were wondering whether or not maybe I'd be interested in working on it with them. I looked at the idea, and I realized these guys had just been on the New York Times bestseller list. That if I let them get away with, if I did this and it was just a short story, I'm stupid. So I talked them into seeing that there could be a novel here. So what happened is that we would get together mostly at Jerry's house, and we would plot and plan and work out the details and the characters and situations. Then I would go away and I would write the first draft. Then I would bring that text into them, and they would rip it apart. I am not sure how many people have ever had the experience of having two world-class, best-selling, award-winning writers on opposite sides of the room, tearing their prose apart at the same time. And Jerry was taking sadistic pleasure in it. I mean, I say this with great affection because I loved Jerry hugely. But he would be over there, we're eviscerating Barnes's precious prose. Was your mother scared by a gerund, Barnes? It was crushing. I literally would drive home with tears streaming down my face because it was just so confrontational. But it was exactly like sparring in the black belt class. I got the crap beat out of me. But I knew that if I could handle it, I would learn lessons in that room that could not be taught in any school in the country, that there was no way to pay for the lessons that I was getting there. And so I simply stuck it out, and I just dealt with it. And we wrote that book, and then we wrote a sequel to it, Beowulf's Children. And then we wrote a novella that was only released on the internet called The Secret of Black Ship Island, some years and years later. And then finally, trying to decide how much of this I say. I guess I'm going to say it. Jerry had a brain tumor that was dealt with radiation, and it diminished his capacity. From being 10 times smarter than me, he was now only about 3 times smarter than me. And he was in grief about the capacity that he'd lost. And I could see Larry was in real grief. Jerry was the best friend Larry would ever have in his lifetime. He was the only playmate that he'd ever have that could really function at the levels that Larry can think at. I can't do it. Larry's mind is beyond mine in terms of that kind of conceptualization. There's no question about it. So he and Jerry were able to be playmates in ways that I could not with Larry. And I saw the grief in this man who had been so good to me. And I saw the grief in Jerry, and one of the strongest, smartest human beings I'd ever known. I thought, my God, life takes everything. But it's not going to take this. However these two men say goodbye to each other, it's not going to be like this. So like right there in his hospital room, with Jerry basically feeling like his life was over, I decided that Jerry could not write anymore, but he could plan and he could evaluate. It was like the corpus callosum that connects the right and left modes of brain was not working quite right. But I said, I can be that corpus. I can take the ideas from these men and I can stand in the middle and I can knit it together and I can give them a chance to say goodbye to each other properly. So for 2 years, I would drive out to Jerry's place every Thursday and we would sit in his living room and we would work over the story. We actually got a video link with Jack Cohen, who had retired and was in England. So we were able to bring in the reproductive biologist part. And for just that period of time, the boys were all back. And we were able to remember what we were. And Jerry basically said that we were keeping him alive. And a week before he died, we were almost finished with the book. And Jerry, who'd been in a walker and wheelchair, was having more and more trouble getting around. He basically said, well, Steve, I guess you don't need me anymore. We're almost done. And I said, yeah, well, if anything were to happen to you, I promised that we would, we'll finish this book. It's going to be terrific. And in a week, he was dead. And I realized in retrospect, he was asking if it was all right for him to go. And I miss him so much. And I am so profoundly glad that I had the clarity to see what was going on and the clarity to see what was needed, and a wife who would understand my need to be good to these men and to give them a gift that only I could give them. I am so glad for all of that. But that's that story. I hope that answers your questions.
It does, in one of the most heartfelt ways that I could have not even imagined that it would, but I am thankful for that nonetheless. I'm thankful for you as a person. You're a very inspirational person to me from the time I was a kid up until now.
I love hearing that. That's great.
I'm 50 years old now, and I think...
And you're rocking it. You're rocking 50. You're making 50 look good.
Well, thank you. That's high praise coming from you, because you look excellent. I mean, I want to grow up and be like you at your age. That's hey.
Great. Great. And let me give you a suggestion. Really sick. Do you have an exercise program?
I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to put something in here. I want you to go to YouTube and look it up. It is a simple exercise program. You can learn it in 10 minutes. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to do at the very beginning, and at the highest levels, it doesn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes. It's just 5 simple exercises. You start with doing 3 of each of them. You keep doing them until you're 21. And by the time you get 21 of each of them, you're spending 10 to 13 minutes, and you're in pretty decent shape overall. I mean, seriously, it's not a bad overall fitness. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself first. Just love yourself enough to discipline yourself in that way. Keep doing things every day that you love. Find something every single day so that by the time you go to bed, you're thinking, I had a great time today. I had a great life today. As you can probably tell, I'm having a great life. I enjoy myself. I don't do anything except hang with people that I enjoy. I'm making great money. I really am in great physical condition. In 3 weeks, I'll be in Atlanta teaching my instructor's karate class for him, and I want to show off, there's going to be advanced black belts there, and I have to dominate them. You know, so I have to, by the time, the first thing I do, I have to make them say, oh God. I want them to be a little bit scared of me, you know, because once they're there, they will relax. And then I can talk about how the movement is a metaphor for our internal states, so that we can say, this is, you're practicing karate on the inside. You're practicing peace on the outside. You're practicing karate on the outside. You're practicing peace on the inside. You're practicing love. You know, it's not what you fight with, it's what you fight for. It's being sure that you're acting for the good of the community at all times. You're keeping your ego out of it. When you do that, whether you're talking about your writing or your love for your family or the martial arts, you hit another level. You've got the winds of nature behind you. You're a force for good. You take on an aspect. As my friend who I did that course with said, show me a woman protecting her child. I'll show you self-defense. When you are fighting for the right things, when you're writing for the right things, when you're living for the right things, you get an energy you don't get from just your ego. So it's always, why are you doing it? Why? Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before we continue, I'm going to interject and say what he typed in is the 5 Tibetans.
That's right.
Yeah.
Look it up on YouTube.
I don't believe the chat is showing per se, so I wanted to put context into.
Yeah, the 5 Tibetans. They are a series of exercises. Nobody really knows where they came from. They all originated a book called The Eye of Revelation by a guy named Peter Kelder, who tells a story about this British army officer who went to this temple in Tibet and learned these exercises. I don't know if I believe that at all, but I don't know where they came from. Nobody does. But they're yoga-like exercises. It's like a cross between yoga and calisthenics, and they work. And they're simple, and anybody can do them, and they're infinitely scalable. You can modify them for your health, and you start by doing very few. You start by doing no more than 3 to 5 of them, and then you add no more than 2 repetitions per week.
And I'll be checking that out as well. Yeah.
You should. It's good overall fitness. And when you're in contact with your body, now you've got your anchor to connect you to the world. And when you're in touch with the survival energy inside you, you have all the energy and aliveness you need. And when you have that survival so that you know you will protect yourself, the little kid inside you feels safe. And now you've got all the creativity you want. So, you know, it's like the adult part of you's job is to go down into the coal mines and work. The child part of you, that kid's job is to play, is to dance, is to enjoy the sunshine. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, as you can tell, my little kid is very alive inside me. You know, he's, you know, that little Stevie is just there. You know, he's about 6 years old, 6, 7 years old, and he looks out at the world and says, "It's a great world, Daddy. What are we going to do today? What are we going to do today?" And I'll say, "You know, we got some writing to do." He said, "Okay, I'll come up with the ideas. You do the work." Okay.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. Have you, John?
All right.
Yeah, it's my job to do the work. It's his job to play.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
Well, this is very enlightening.
Yeah, I think, you know, if we want to do more of this, we need to set up another time. I do want to get into my day and check on my son and my wife and so forth. So, any last questions?
No more questions. But we just want to thank you for granting us this interview, granting us this time.
Hey, you said you've been waiting all your life for this, so I wanted to make sure it was worth it.
It definitely has been, and I'm sure that it will be for our audience as well.
Well, what more can I ask? I mean, seriously, in life, the only things you keep ultimately are the things you give away. So the more of myself I give away, the longer I live. You know, it's like if I say something to you, and you can turn around and give it to your kids, give it to your audience, whatever, then I'm part of a flow that just goes on, and I'm not too impressed with me. You know, I don't take myself all that seriously. You know, it's like, okay, I'm going to be dead and gone at some point, and so the real question is, how alive can I be today? Who can I help? Who can I love? So I need to go love my son and my wife. Anything else I can do for you?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say thank you so much for taking the time today. It was a pleasure. I
love the posters in the background. The Wonder Woman poster.
That is, yes.
I love, man, the No Man's Land sequence in that first Wonder Woman movie was one of the most inspiring things I have ever seen in my life.
Absolutely. I'm a Wonder Woman fan from the George Perez era, and actually I watched Linda Carter as well, but I'm not going to go down all that. But yes, huge fan. And so just thank you for your time. You said some very inspiring things. I will follow up with you if it's okay about these other issues I kind of hinted
Absolutely. You know, if there's something I can do to help you, you try the 5-minute miracle. If you try it and you want more, get in touch with me and we will work with your situation to be sure you have the resources that you need.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll talk. But thank you for the offer, and I will follow up. And
just remind me where I met you. I don't tend to remember names. I remember contexts.
Very good. I will.
Okay. Take care, guys. Have a wonderful day.
All right.
Stay safe.
All right. You too. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Oh, I didn't mean to have him cut off like that. Sorry, John.
No. That's fine. He had things to do, and he's a important figure in the world. So I just want to cap this episode off to say to our audience that I hope that you got as much out of this episode as I did. And if you weren't familiar with Stephen Barnes before, go check him out now. You'll be glad you did. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please give us your feedback. We love to hear from you. Our audience is why we do this. And until next time, stay nerdy.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.